Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Well, the atrocities perpetrated by Russian forces in Ukraine have captured both attention and condemnation. Our guest today is an expert on East European affairs and a critic of Canadian government policy as a response to the Russian invasion. Marcus Kolga joins us today. He's a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, a public policy think tank. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks so much for having me on, Tony.
I guess first, I'd love to get I know it's just an ever-changing story every minute, every hour, every day. What's your assessment of where things stand with the war at this stage?
Well, you're right. I mean, the story is ever-changing every day, but one thing that remains constant is Vladimir Putin's brutality, the brutality of his forces, and the terror that he is inflicting on the people of Ukraine with his invasion. Where we're at right now, we're in week 7 of this invasion. It looks as though Vladimir Putin and the officials that enable him have recognized the failures of the invasion over the past several weeks. Their failure to take Kiev in what many Western experts assumed would fall in 2 to 3 days. Kiev, the Ukrainian forces held out for all of these weeks, and in fact have been able to push Russian forces out of Kiev. And so Vladimir Putin now is engaging in a reset of his strategy. I think that he is recalibrating his goals to focus primarily on Eastern Ukraine, which many of us thought was the initial objective of this war. And so he's pulled back his forces. He's resupplying them, reconstituting them, and will probably focus, like I said, on Eastern Ukraine and the southern portion of Ukraine between Mariupol, the Russian border, and Crimea to create a land bridge between Russia and Crimea. He's also conducted a major shakeup of the leaders of this invasion. He's put in the leadership position a general named Dvornikov. He's better known as the butcher of Syria. He was in charge of the Russian forces that assisted in the suppression of the Syrian uprising and in support of the government there. During his time in charge of those forces, Russian forces engaged in mass chemical warfare against the Syrian civilian populations, engaged and supported mass torture of captives, and in the systematic rape of civilian Syrian women. And so this new general that's being put in place, he specializes clearly in terror, in depopulizing various different urban regions. And so the brutality of this invasion that we've seen over the past several weeks will probably become much worse and intensify in the coming weeks.
We've been looking at the Russian offense, but we've also, as Canadians and as members of NATO generally, looking at NATO's response and Canada's response. So I'd love to get your take on both of those aspects of this story.
Look, I think most of us, the experts who understand who Vladimir Putin is, what his objectives are, one of the things that we've been calling for, and certainly the Ukrainian government and President Zelensky have been calling for, is more lethal defensive weapons to help the Ukrainians defend their sovereignty. It's become very clear, and it was clear early on, that NATO would not be putting boots on the ground to defend Ukraine. There just isn't the political will and support in many European capitals for this. So weapons is what we need to send to the Ukrainians. Now, Canada has sent some defensive weapons, including some anti-tank, anti-armor missiles, some old grenades, and some rifles, but also importantly, protective armor, helmets, and such. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for Ukraine, our Eastern NATO partners in the Baltic states have, and Eastern Europe in general, have sent a steady supply of weapons. Estonia, for example, just yesterday surpassed the $250 million mark insofar as aid, lethal defensive aid that is being sent to Ukraine.